The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Socrates. There's a peculiar habit that persists across history, the tendency of each era to retrofit its own ideologies onto the past. This isn't just an intellectual quirk, it's a philosophical fallacy, what scholars call presentism. Through this lens, ancient belief systems are often flattened, explained away as primitive superstitions or practical adaptations to environmental conditions. Their spiritual or existential truths are dismissed as illusions, false consciousness, we're told, by modern commentators certain of their own rational clarity. Take, for example, the dietary laws of Islam. A devout Muslim refrains from eating pork, believing it to be impure according to divine law. Yet, a secular anthropologist might claim the real reason lies in the ecological impracticalities of raising pigs in nomadic societies. The subtle arrogance here is not just in offering a different explanation, but in assuming both cannot be true, that religious devotion cannot also emerge alongside material reasoning. In this binary framing, spiritual belief is reduced to evolutionary coincidence. We see this interpretive distortion most clearly in how we understand ancient thinkers. Consider the modern treatment of Stoicism. Many popular summaries reduce its expansive metaphysical framework to simple slogans like the dichotomy of control, as if Epictetus were just another motivational speaker. The rich theology and cosmology of the Stoics, their deep engagement with logos and fate, is conveniently ignored in favor of a version that fits neatly into the modern self-help genre. But no figure has suffered this interpretive game more than Socrates. His ghost has been endlessly recast to suit the ideological needs of the age. A conservative moralist here, a proto-Christian martyr there, or a closet atheist in yet another narrative. Each retelling says more about the interpreter than about the man himself. Yet the real Socrates was far stranger than any of these caricatures. He walked barefoot through snow, meditated for hours without moving, and showed radical indifference to social norms, even expressing an unusual admiration for women in a patriarchal world. He was eccentric, divisive, deeply principled, and profoundly enigmatic. Among the most curious of Socrates' traits was his reference to a mysterious voice, a personal guide that warned him but never directed him. This voice, which he described as a daimonion, never told him what to do, only what not to do. If it was silent, Socrates took it as a sign of approval. He considered it a divine presence, a guardian that protected him from folly, even in the most trivial matters. In Apology, Plato quotes Socrates explaining that he had heard this voice since childhood. It had prevented him from political life, warned him in everyday life, and even interrupted him mid-sentence. But on the day of his trial, as he walked into the courtroom to receive his death sentence, the voice was silent. To Socrates, this silence was not abandonment, but approval. He interpreted it as a signal that death was not a misfortune, but a kind of liberation. In his final words to the court, he claimed that this divine silence proved that dying was a good, and that those who feared death misunderstood its nature. In his view, the worst thing would be to betray his own principles. Physical death was secondary to spiritual corruption. What's remarkable is that this divine voice did not function like a modern notion of conscience. It wasn't a whisper urging him toward ethical righteousness. It wasn't a nagging inner critic or an angel on his shoulder. It was a presence that acted as a safeguard, not a guide. Its silence meant consent, not indifference. Modern people are fond of speaking about conscience as though it's a kind of internal compass, a private courtroom where morality is weighed and verdicts are issued. But when examined closely, this concept falls apart. Conscience is a linguistic sleight of hand, a metaphor mistaken for an entity. We talk about it as if it's a thing, a conscience, my conscience, the conscience. But what is it really? We use phrases like wrestling with my conscience or clear conscience without asking whether the idea makes any logical sense. It's like saying, I visited courage yesterday. It only works because we've confused process with substance. Thinking about a moral dilemma is real, but calling that process conscience turns a dynamic mental activity into a mythical object. And with that object, we smuggle in the illusion of absolute truth. That's the danger. When we treat conscience as something discrete and authoritative, we start imagining it holds access to objective moral law. But if conscience is always right, then it must be divine. If it's not always right, then it's unreliable, and no more than a cluster of impressions shaped by culture, upbringing, and experience. In either case, it cannot be the moral arbiter we wish it to be. It's easy to say, trust your conscience. It's harder to admit that what we call conscience might just be a mix of fear, memory, habit, and desire. Real moral clarity doesn't emerge from an inner judge. It's cultivated slowly through attention, reflection, and commitment to something higher than the self. Socrates understood this better than most. He didn't trust his gut or his conscience. He listened to a mysterious external voice that offered no commands, only caution. He believed goodness was not a matter of rules or impulses, but of knowledge, and that evil was simply the absence of that knowledge. In Socratic ethics, nobody does wrong willingly. We err not because we're wicked, but because we misunderstand what is truly good. Virtue ethics, the moral system Socrates helped inspire, sees evil as a deficit, not a force. A person isn't evil, they're simply unwise, lacking temperance, courage, or humility. In this view, what we call evil acts are the result of ignorance, not malice. Morality becomes less about judgment and more about learning, about moving closer to truth, even if we never fully grasp it. So why did Socrates calmly accept his execution? Because the voice, the daimonion, did not stop him.